Got it? Read it out loud. Matthew 5:21 through 22.
Okay.
Go ahead. What wants to do?
You've heard that it was said to people long ago, do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, Aka is answerable to St. Peter. But anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell.
So basically what Jesus is saying here is that even if you have said to your brother, you're a fool, if you've said just an angry word to your brother, then you are in danger of hell's fire. Think about that. He's not saying he killed your brother. He's not saying that you did this or that. He's saying if you have even just said an angry word to your brother. And then some people would say like, well, who is my neighbor? Like they ask Jesus that, and basically Jesus is like, everyone is your neighbor. So who is my brother? Everyone is your brother. And if you have even said an angry word to them, then you are in danger of hell's fire. That's what Jesus is saying here. Oh man, I remember when I first heard this, a pastor was showing this way of witnessing to people. I remember thinking like, man, I murdered a lot of people in my day. I just annihilated people. You know? I'm serious, man. I've said probably more angry words than anyone I know. And so I was like, whoo, but then he hit this next verse up. It's in Matthew 5:27 through 30. Go ahead and read that. Someone else have a different translation?
Yes.
Go ahead.
You have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone that looked at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart.
And then he goes on to say, if your eyes are causing you to stumble, it's better for you to poke them out than for them to throw your whole body into fire. Now, Jesus is not saying that he's promoting self-mutilation. What he was saying is God takes sin seriously. God takes where we look and the things that cause us to sin seriously. And if they're causing you to sin, it would be better for you to pull your eyes out, to cut your hands off, than it would be for you to fall into sin and fall into hell's fire. That's pretty serious. That's pretty serious. And James, it says here in James 2:10 through 11. So first it's talking about adultery. Then it's talking, first talking about murder. Then it's talking about adultery. Now it's going to say, and now it's going to tie all of the commandments together because they've already admitted that they've broken most of the commandments. Not all, but most of the commandments. And usually I like to break down the commandments too and go through them and say, well, you know, have you ever just taken $1 that didn't belong to you? Yes, well then you've stolen. You know? Have you ever missed a Sunday church service? Yes, you've broken the Sabbath. You know, going through them and stuff, because we have to have an understanding of sin. Now you have to be careful with this. You have to be able to gauge the person. Because if you just start if they already are feeling the conviction of God upon their heart, taking them through this is going to make it worse. You're done. You know, they're already feeling the conviction of God. You have to be listening to what they're saying. You know? Asking them, do you think you're a sinner? Well, yeah, kind of. Well, what do you mean by yeah, kind of? You know, asking them those probing questions to kind of get them talking about this subject, you know? So James 2:10 through 11. Go ahead, whoever has that, read that.
And the person who keeps all the laws except one is as guilty as the person who has broken all of God's laws. For the same God who said, do not commit adultery, also said, do not murder. So if you murder someone, you have broken the entire law, even if you do not commit adultery.
So he's saying if you've even murdered, because James knew what his brother said about murder. He says if you've even committed murder, but you haven't committed adultery, you're guilty of breaking every law. And I explain it like this, and so does Ray Comfort. Now we all hang from a 10-link chain, a 10-link chain. And if one link on those 10 links breaks, then the chain is worthless. We fall. And that's the reality. God holds us accountable to sin. And he takes sin very seriously. We don't take sin very seriously, but God takes sin very seriously. Why don't we take sin very seriously? Because we don't fully understand the penalty for our sins. We don't fully understand what sin takes us to. We don't fully understand understand and see the destructive power of sin. But God, because he's God, can see it from the beginning all the way to the end. It's like with Kanika, and she's walking and she's discovering things, and when you have little kids, or you've been around little kids, you can see trauma happening before it happens. Like you can see it coming. You're like, that's going to hurt. And I've told you 3 times, you're going to bust your face off this and it's going to hurt. But you keep thinking that you know better than I do, so now go ahead. And then she'll fall down and she'll bust her head and she'll go, Daddy! And I'll pick her up and I'll hug her and say, I told you. You kept wanting to do your thing, and now you busted your face. And now I'm here to help you and to hug you, but I was telling you. And some people say, well, Kanika's a little young. She doesn't understand that. Well, she does understand that. She does understand. And if she can understand yes, no, right, wrong, you know what I'm saying? God has placed that intrinsically in all of us. And so James says that if you have broken just one of God's laws, you're guilty of breaking all of God's laws. And Paul doesn't give the Gentiles any room for error, because he says God has written his laws on our hearts. God has written his laws on our hearts. We know what's right and wrong. Our hearts know what's right and wrong. Now, culture and other things might sear the right and wrong in our hearts. But deep down, we know what is good and bad and right and wrong. You know, somewhere deep down inside, we know murdering someone is wrong. C.S. Lewis said that was like our greatest combatant against the fact that there is no God. Because why would an evolving creature ever evolve a notion like that? You get what I'm saying? If I'm the strongest, baddest person on the block, why do I want any morality restricting me from implementing my will and my rights upon everyone that I'm stronger than? Right? But it's because God has written his law upon our hearts. Because God is the one that says each person has worth and value. The reason why God annihilated the whole human race at Noah's time, it's because someone would steal your bacon and they would shake you to death. There's places in the world where that's still the law of today. You know? And God said that's evil. Because I have created that person, and that person is more valuable than a piece of bacon. God is the one who assesses value to someone's life. And so, it comes down to this. You've broken God's law. You've offended God 7 times, 8 times. And think about this. If you have just sinned against God one time, every day, for 80 years, how many sins is that, Tony? You love math. If you've just sinned God one time, every day of the year, for 80 years, how many sins is that?
27,000.
What?
About 27,000.
27,000 sins. Now, I know I've committed way more. I mean, I'm probably around like a 50, 60 sin caliber even now in my life. You know, I mean, a day. You know, I'll be honest with you. Some days when I'm not real hot and irritated, they tend to be a little bit less. But think about that. You come to God with 27,000 sins and say, hey, I'm generally just a really good guy. Just overlook that.
That's just one a day.
That's just one a day.
About 30,000.
Yeah. That's just one a day. And you come to God and you say, hey, God, don't sweat 27,000 sins. I'm really just a pretty good person.
29,200.
Yeah.
29,200. Can you stand before God with that?